After analyzing the data, we found that we're just too fragmented because we're spending like 5% of the budget on this vertical, 5% of the budget on this vertical, and it wasn't enough to drive significant business. And we found that a lot of the verticals were coming in through the horizontal use cases. And so we went to the head of our vertical sales and basically brought data to the table and said, hey, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a much better ROI relative to people coming through these horizontal use cases. We're going to kill all these vertical campaigns for 2024. And in most cases, you would see the vertical salesperson are you crazy? You can't do that. We need these dedicated campaigns. But since we brought data to the table and showed her, she's like, that makes sense.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples. Not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz. Real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Marketing conventional wisdom is to keep branding and demand generation somewhat separate. Separating these functions allows each team to specialize and become experts in their respective areas. At least that's the conventional wisdom I've heard. To use a military analogy, branding is the air cover and demand gen is the infantry. But I read a lesson in a podcast guest application that challenges that conventional wisdom. Combine your branding and demand generation. Whoa, bold statement. Here to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Jim Kruger, Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Informatica. Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to be with you, and thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Well, let me tell the audience a bit who I'm talking to. Let's look at your background before we dive in here. Jim's been a manager of marketing planning and analysis at GTE Wireless early in an illustrious career. Then he's been director of product management at Palm, CMO and EVP at Polycom, and for the past 3 years, he's been at Informatica. Informatica is a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. It reported total annual recurring revenue of $1.63 billion for 2023, and Jim leads a team of 140 people there. So Jim, give us a sense. What is your day like as EVP and CMO?
Yeah, that's one of the great things about marketing is your days are filled with different things every single day. So I typically wake up in the morning and get on email, check email, and look at my day. And one of the things I do that really helps me is I set alarms for all of my meetings because sometimes you just get so caught up in working on things. So I'm always connecting with the team. So I have a lot of internal meetings, but I also like to make sure that I'm aware of what's happening in the market across the marketing function. And so I do a lot of external things as well. In fact, just yesterday, I was at Dreamforce, for example, spent the day there in San Francisco and just collecting information and talking to different people, sort of understanding what's happening in the marketing landscape. So on a lot of Zoom calls, like many people, and just going into the office 2 days a week. So 3 days a week, I work at home Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is great because my commute is terrible. It takes about an hour and 15 minutes in the morning and up to 2 hours in the afternoon to get home. So the 2 days a week and 3 days at home is super productive for me because I can get my great meetings in face-to-face with the team. We have only about 20% of the team in Redwood City, which is where our headquarters is, and the rest of the team is global. So, sometimes I have early morning meetings with the EMEA team and evening meetings with the APJ team. So sometimes the day extends out, but I always try to find time at the end of the day to go play tennis. That's my passion, and or get some exercise in and just make sure you kind of refresh and stay balanced, which is really important.
Well, this would be a good time for me to say, if anyone else has a brutal commute like that, you know what makes it shorter is listening to the How I Made It Marketing podcast. But I'm glad you only have to do that a couple days a week. When you talk about that external look, you get the internal, but you're also looking externally. I think it ties well into one of the first lessons from one of the things you made. I've mentioned before, I've never really been in any other profession, but I don't think others get to make things like we do and make things for customers sometimes. So you said one of your first lessons is understand your customers' needs and build personalized strategies. So that sounds good in theory, Jim, but can you tell us the story of how you've done that?
Yeah, well, I think personalization is becoming much, much more important, and it's not a new concept. When I go back to my days back at GTE Wireless, when I was a marketing manager, we actually started thinking about personalization and one-to-one at that point in time. In fact, I remember we had an all-day session with Peppers and Rogers on one-to-one marketing. Dating myself a little bit, but that concept was new at that point, and it's continued to evolve, but in some cases hasn't changed that much. And so that definitely plays into sort of ABM and ABX strategies, which are a core part of what we do at Informatica. We target mainly the large enterprise. And so we have certainly a set of accounts. We have our CRO 100 that we work with our sales team on, and really try to build strategies to target those specific accounts. And one of the specific things that we're sort of in process of doing is really shifting from focusing on a marketing qualified lead into more of a surround account perspective. In looking at some of the statistics in Salesforce and working again very closely with our sales team, we find that if you don't have at least 20 contacts within an account, ranging from the technical side all the way up to the chief data officer or the CIO, your likelihood of closing that deal goes way down. And when we do engage at that level, we see our average selling prices almost double because it's a much more strategic sell. And we have a kind of a full platform with 7 different categories in it, kind of an end-to-end for data management. And when we sell in at the lower end of the spectrum, we see sort of a satisfying sort of one use case, and it's not a very strategic sell. So we're trying to really work with our sales team and up level, and that's in process. And we're actually right in the middle of our 25 planning, and that's a key initiative for us to really build on. So we're building strategies around that for sure. But we know that. And this is an old adage that when a prospect is searching for a solution, they conduct at least 60% of that search and get far down the line from a digital perspective. And so we've put a lot of focus on really improving our digital journey for customers in terms of from our website. We have a content council that that meets on a weekly basis. We do assessment of which content's working, which content's not working, and really build that content out from a journey perspective per campaign. And that has really helped us significantly. And I'm a big believer in not going after volume of content, but really being focused. And when I joined Informatica 3 years ago, and I assessed the content play that they had, about 60% of the content that they had created was not activated, was at the bottom of the list relative to effectiveness. And so we really honed in and sort of did an audit and cleared all that out. And I think we did, for the most part, cut our content production by about 50%, but we increased our effectiveness by like 25 to 30%. And so that framework that we put into play from a content perspective is working extremely well. And that's, again, by persona. So we sell it, from a technical perspective and then from an executive perspective, and we kind of do that bifurcation, and that's definitely helped us. And then we build community around each one of those, and that's been super successful for us as well.
Well, can you maybe give us an example of how you build a quality piece of content? Because here, I mean, it's just, I'm singing just hearing you say that. It's a man after my own heart. Because the thing I've seen in being in this industry for so long is it's just this movement towards quantity, and AI is not helping with that, right? Let's just throw up as much dreck as we can and we'll get some leads in. But I mean, we need to take specific steps to actually give quality, because ultimately what we're trying to do is build some trust with someone, get them to raise a hand. The one thing, I don't know if you've noticed as much that I did with this podcast, because Jim is, works at a big company, dealing with his PR reps more, so people know on the back end. But one thing I did when doing this podcast is I specifically don't use a Calendly link to book people. And the reason I don't do that, even though it's easier, it just feels like there's more of a human touch. And this isn't one of those podcasts where we're just churning out like 20 episodes a week, where we're just throwing that together. So that's one small thing I did. But I wonder for you, Jim, like what does it take to produce quality content? Is it hiring freelance reporters for B2B publications to actually write the content? You mentioned a content council, which I assume is your customers. I mean, what else are you doing to actually make that quality?
Yeah, well, the council is our internal teams. It's cross-functional, and so again, one of the things that I was finding was that content was being created, but there was no activation plan. So we have a very simple sort of one-page form that anybody who wants to create content across the marketing team for whatever reason, for a campaign, for the website, whatever it might be, they have to fill out this one pager, and they come to the council and they propose it. So the entire marketing team has visibility into any piece of content that's being created. And if it's a campaign manager that's creating it, they need to talk to the web team prior to coming to the council and making sure that they've mapped out how this piece of content is going to be activated. So I think the first thing and most important thing is again really understanding your audience. And who is that piece of content targeted to, and making sure that you're in lockstep with sales, who's in front of customers a lot, but also talking to customers directly and really understanding what is their journey, what are their needs, and what type of information do they need to make a decision. And of course, at the top of the funnel, and we try to really simplify it by that journey in terms of how do we attract people, how do we engage with them, and then how do we move into the close, and kind of organize our content simply from that perspective. And so at the top of the funnel, it's really helping customers to, for them to map out their strategy, to understand what direction they should take, and not getting into the, Informatica is great. At that point, it's really just helping them to sort of move down the path. And then as we engage with them, then we can start to serve up more information around our solution and how it helps them solve specific problems. And we're really shifting, like many Silicon Valley companies, shifting from the product push and the features and capabilities, which the sales team has been used to more of a business value framework, and really focusing on use cases. And in fact, just yesterday, I met with the team, and we're trying to line those use cases up from product to marketing out to sales. Not an easy thing to do, but making sure that we're all using the same language and all focused on the same use cases, so that from campaign all the way down to the sales team and where the rubber hits the road, there's consistency. And that will help us tremendously to just focus and make sure that we're focused on the biggest use cases, because there could be literally probably 50 use cases that we could do, but we've honed it down to about 12 to 14 big ones that lead to discussions around product. So it's just flipping things so that we're not leading with product, we're leading with use cases, which leads to here's how we solve that specific problem. So and when we look at content, one of the, I would say, more important things is what is the title of the content as well. So I think people are really interested in best practices, what are other companies doing, and really, again, creating content that's going to resonate with your audience to help them solve their problems is what it's all about.
Well, it's also the
Yeah,
fun thing about being a marketer. Like, yes, it's nice to meet financial goals, of course. We need to do that to get the paycheck. But actually thinking like, hey, the marketing I'm doing, it's helping someone. Like you said, they're on a journey. Let's help them get down that journey and make the best decision for themselves. And if it's our product, well, then let's help them make that decision too. You mentioned something
exactly.
there. You mentioned something there, speaking the same language. And I think that ties into our next lesson here, combine your branding and demand generation. And when I hear that, combine your branding and demand generation, in a way it sounds obvious, but also I've just never seen this kind of work smoothly sometimes, because to me, branding, it was like the popular kids in high school. You know what I mean? That's what branding is. And demand gen is like, I don't know, the chess club or academic team. And to be clear, I was on the academic team and not picking on them, but it just seems so culturally and goally, if that's a word, different. So how did you get this idea and how did you actually make it work?
Yeah. So when I first joined Informatica, we had a sort of standalone siloed brand campaign. And we had, when I joined, we had just gone public a few months before, and the company had invested a significant amount into that branding campaign. But when I assessed it, it wasn't connected. It wasn't the same look and feel. It was sort of a separate siloed thing that you could tell a different group within the company, the branding team, had put together a branding campaign, and they hadn't, thought about how can we build the synergies with other things that are going on across the marketing team. And so when I talk about brand gen, it's actually making sure that those teams are talking together, that there's a consistent look and feel, and that they're building off of each other, because I view marketing as building blocks, and it's a system of all the different elements, things that you're doing that come together in an integrated way to target your audience. And they may see something on your website, they see it in a campaign, they see it in an email, they see it in a social post. All of that has to be consistent and same look and feel. And so when I talk about brand gen, it just means that you're taking a look at that holistically, and how does the message build off of each other. And one of the things that we did shortly thereafter, after I joined, and I'm a big believer in this, is that we created what I call an umbrella message. It's not a tagline that gets attached to the brand, but it's more of an umbrella message. And I did this at Polycom, and then did it at Informatica. And at Polycom, it was just a simple statement in terms of what you do as a company, and it's got to be very simple language. And so that statement was defy distance. So we created collaboration tools to help you defy distance. And so we basically built a whole campaign around that. And that was our message that was integrated across everything that we did. So anytime anybody saw anything from Polycom, they saw whatever the key message was, but it was all about helping you to defy distance. And for Informatica, we created an umbrella message where data and AI come to life. And so we help companies bring your data and AI to life. And that ultimately helps you to have one source of data, one source of truth within your organization. You don't get sales and marketing showing up and with different data. It's all the same. So you stop all of those arguments. We help customers to make better decisions, right? So based on the data that they have, it's governed, it's in compliance, and we really focus on how do we democratize data across an organization and give people access to the right type of data. So that's what we mean by when we bring data to life, and then all of our customer stories and success stories, basically are the proof points in terms of how do we help customers bring their data to life. And so that's a moniker that we use. If you go to our website, if you look at our campaigns, if you look anywhere, that's sort of the common thread that goes through everything. And that helps to create this consistency across demand gen and brand, where they build off of each other.
Well, then give us an idea process-wise of how this would work, because you mentioned the umbrella message. I like that. Some
Yeah.
companies, they'll formalize a value proposition and make sure everyone in the company and every vendor has it. Some companies, you mentioned when it came to content, you had a specific process of how that's requested. So is there anything process-wise? So again, like this sounds good in theory. Let's get on the same page and speak in a single language. Is there anything process-wise you had to do to get this to work, to get everyone, using that umbrella message and then working together between all these different departments?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, it really has to be driven by the overall company versus this is a marketing initiative. So we started and we worked with an agency to help us come up with concepts. We did a significant number of actually focus groups and did some informal discussions with customers and got some feedback specifically from them. And we got sort of, down the path and narrowed down to about 3 to 5 different messages. And that's when we brought our CEO in. We brought our CPO in, head of sales, and got sort of all the key go-to-market functional groups along with our CEO together and had some discussion and got alignment. Not easy to do because everyone has their own opinion, but got alignment across that and got buy-in that this is the direction that we want to go. And then I actually launched that in my keynote at our sales kickoff that year, and built assets around it, and so forth and so on. So and laid it out to the sales team, and we knew, it was gonna work because we did a lot of testing. We did a lot of bouncing it off. So it wasn't like, oh gosh, I hope this works. We had done our homework prior to that. We'd done, one of the difficult things is to find something that works globally, that will translate well, and so again, that the simplification of it, the words that you use is really important for that. And so that whole process, a ton of work went into it. It's like a simple statement, but a ton of work went into it to make sure that when we launched it, we knew that it was going to get traction. We knew that the sales team was going to like it because we tested it with many of them, and tested it with customers as well. And it's been wildly successful. So I'm super happy and pleased. And now it's like we need to continue to beat that drum and proliferate it across the market. And we might get tired of it, but as we all know in marketing, it takes 10, 15, 20 times for people to see something before it starts to sink in. So we're far from that. And I view it as probably up to a 2 to 3 year initiative that we'll continue to support and build on.
Yeah, you talk about that kind of working across the organization there, sales you mentioned. I think that ties into your next lesson, eliminate silos and cultivate trusting relationships. And we always talk about this, eliminate silos, but this is the analogy I love to use to say how hard it is to do, because Silicon Valley has been talking about this for a long time. You mentioned your headquarters is in Redwood City. So there's also another headquarters in Redwood City of Oracle. And if you've ever seen the Oracle headquarters, they are literally silos. That is literally what the headquarters is. And I think that's a nice reminder that 20 years ago when I was, working with companies out there, they were talking about this. We're still talking about this. It's hard to do. They literally made the headquarters silos. So how have you broken down those silos? How are you doing that?
Yeah, I think there's different levels, and for me as CMO, it is absolutely critical that I build relationships across the executive team, and first and foremost drive that at a level where there's a significant amount of trust and relationships across there. But it's also delivering and performing. Because while you can build relationships and build trust, if you don't deliver and perform, it's only going to go so far. So those go hand in hand and are really important. So you have to make sure that you have strong alignment across the key functions and with the CEO, of course. So when I joined Informatica, that was one of my, first things that I wanted to do was build those relationships, because I knew that I was going to be working closely across all those executives, and that sets the tone for the rest of the team. And so when I joined, there were definitely silos. It was quite challenging because the team had been managed by sales for a year, which I think can be challenging depending on who that sales leader is, because marketing can turn into sort of a tactical organization under that in some cases, not all. And then actually our CEO, who admits that he is not a classical marketer, led the team for a year. So it was 2 years of I would say, sort of siloed performance and the way that they went to market. So I had to break down a lot of barriers, and not only across the company, but also within my own team, and set the example of how do you collaborate. And so I'm a big believer in being open book, and building trust, and having a high level of integrity right across those teams. Because if you don't do that as a CMO, and people don't trust you, and or they don't believe that you're on the right track with helping sales, or working with a product team to bring new products to market and in line with the CEO, you're gonna be in trouble. You're probably not going to be very successful. So over my career, that has been, and in some cases there's people that are more difficult to work with than others, but you got to figure it out. And I think that's one of the things that, not to toot my own horn, but I think is one of the things that I do fairly well, is to figure out how to work with all walks of life. And it might be difficult, but you got to figure it out because it's not changing. And so we have, taken those barriers down, and I have great working relationships across all of our executive team, and definitely high level of trust, and within my own team. In fact, we just had a board meeting a few weeks back, and the board commented on how much the marketing team has transformed, in that we have integrated programs, and the team is like working together, and the right hand knows what the left hand's doing, versus when I first joined and I talked about that branding campaign that was sort of this separate siloed thing. We're just not doing those types of things. Everything that we're doing is fully integrated across the team, and that required also some change out of personnel and so forth to which is always difficult to do, but I'm like, I love building teams, and making sure everybody is in the same boat together, have the same objectives. That's a key thing. And one of our biggest ones was pipeline. So I own pipeline for the company, not just for marketing, but across sales as well. And so I have to report out on that every week in our executive meeting. And so I had to get my team aligned. So I hardwired the pipeline goals into everybody's objectives, and help people to understand how what you do is connected to driving that pipeline. And that was transformative for the team as well, to get everybody aligned from that perspective. And I talk about that, first and foremost on every meeting that we've had. And we've had a significant improvement in performance there, to where we're hitting all of our and exceeding all of our goals relative to the pipeline build. We have a lot of work to do on the progression side of things, but that engine is running extremely well.
So one of the biggest, feedback, pushback, concerns I hear from marketers is that like everyone in the organization thinks they're a marketer, right? So I wonder like what you do to kind of protect the marketing ideas, because I hear that from a lot of companies. But as you just mentioned, not only do you probably have that, but the CEO led marketing and the sales guy led marketing, and now you're leading marketing. So they've literally been in your shoes before. So those are difficult relationships to manage. What do you do to make sure you kind of protect marketing's ideas and independence?
Yeah, it's absolutely a challenge, no doubt about it. But I think building on that trust and performance really takes the magnifying glass off of marketing in terms of delivering on your numbers. But also you have to be data driven. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that we did this year. We have a vertical sales team. Healthcare, education, financial services. And last year we had dedicated campaigns for each one of those verticals. And we operate such that we have a campaign framework, and it's basically our blueprints in terms of how we're going to execute for the year. What are the key campaigns we're going to do? How much do we invest in each one? And after analyzing the data, we found that we're just too fragmented, because we were spending like 5% of the budget on this vertical, 5% of the budget on this vertical, and it wasn't enough to drive significant business. And we found that a lot of the verticals were coming in through the horizontal use cases. And so we went to the head of our vertical sales and basically brought data to the table and said, hey, like, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a much better ROI relative to people coming through these horizontal use cases. We're going to kill all these vertical campaigns for 2024. And in most cases, you would see the vertical salesperson like, well, are you crazy? You can't do that. We need these dedicated campaigns. But since we brought data to the table and showed her, she's like, that makes sense. And then we in our planning meeting just this week, I had the team. I wanted the team to do the analysis, and we've seen a 44% increase in lead generation over last year for our vertical business based on that decision. And so if we would have gone to her and just said, hey, this is what we want to do, but we didn't have the data to support it, she would have been, no way we're getting rid of these campaigns. But we brought the data to the table. She understood it. She bought into it. And lo and behold, like it just went off the charts, high and good for her business. So that's just a good example of, like, you got to bring data to the table. You got to do your homework. You got to make sure that you have a backup in terms of why you want to do something. And I think most people, again, if you build that credibility, most people are going to say, okay, got it. Go for it. My idea was bad. So.
Well, that collaboration is so key to marketing. That's what we talk about. That's the whole second half of the episode. But before we get into that part, I should mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is underwritten by MechLabs AI, the parent organization of Marketing Sherpa. You can build a new artificial intelligence strategy or optimize your current AI strategy with an AI quick win intensive from MechLabs. Learn more at intensives.mechlabsai.com. That's intensives.mechlabsai.com. All right, well, you just gave a great example of the importance of collaboration in marketing. Let's talk about some specific people you called out that you learned from. You said people want to feel part of a team, and without empathy, that is very difficult to do. You learned this from Amit Walia, the CEO of Informatica, I assume your current boss. How did you learn this from Amit?
Yeah, Amit was one of the key reasons why I joined Informatica. I think it's really important to, in the CEO position as a CMO, you have to make sure that you have, I would say, aligned values and goals and are thinking the same way about things. And Amit definitely does that. And he gave many examples of things that he had done from an employee perspective, which I was super impressed with when I joined the company. An example is when the company went public, he wanted to make sure that everybody got a piece of the action. And when many companies go public, it's only the upper echelon that get the benefit of that. And he went to bat for all employees and made sure that everybody was a part of that. And so he truly cares deeply about the employees and making sure that they understand the strategy, that he's a great communicator out to them, but he's definitely an employee advocate and really believes that that's the foundational of a successful company. And so I've learned a lot from him from that perspective. I have that same perspective in terms of truly caring about people, because if your employees are not happy, if they're not excited every time they get up in the morning about what they're doing, it's like, oh, geez, I got to do this again. You're just not going to get the level of performance, the level of commitment from your employees. So I spend a lot of my time focused on making sure that the team feels connected, making sure that they're aligned to where we're headed as an organization. I send out a communication every Friday. It's called the Friday Forward, and I give updates across the team in terms of key things that happened that week. What are some of the successes that we can celebrate? Calling out people for great work that they've done, and as a part of that, I also include a piece of learning, something that I read that week, and I try to keep it to something that's like 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes I call out a book, but most of the time it's just a short little, could be a podcast. It could be, something that's written, could be a video, so forth and so on. So that helps for people to stay connected. And then I spent a lot of time on career development as well, because that's really important to team members. And so I've created a separate program from what the company has done, and set aside a certain amount of budget every quarter for people to go out and attend conferences, attend classes, and bring that back into the company, because it's going to help us in spades going forward relative to new technologies. What are other companies doing? And so kind of staying on the forefront of what's happening across marketing. And that, from an empathy perspective and from an employee engagement perspective, has really helped, people to, advance their careers relative to positioning them ready for the next step, which I think is a really important thing. So, Amit's approach, I'm 100% bought in terms of thinking about employees, making sure that they're happy and that they're engaged. We do engagement surveys every year, and in fact, the last one we just did, we're just finalizing. We put 3 Tiger teams together, and they've come up with some really, excellent recommendations that we're in process of implementing. So that cultural piece, the empathy, is cornerstone and really important to our success.
So that's a great example of empathy for your team. Let's go one level deeper. How do you instill in your team empathy for the customer, right? So to give you a quick example, I wrote a case study with Bank of America, how during the COVID pandemic, right, they had to shift. They had all these in-person banks and locations, and then all of a sudden they had everyone calling in and not going to these locations. So there was some empathy for their team of like, okay, let's let you work from home. You don't need to be in these locations and be near anyone where it's dangerous. But then they were trying to instill in their team empathy for the customer who now was going through all this stuff, couldn't go in person, had to call. They were actually really excited because during that difficult time, their client satisfaction actually increased to 85.6%. So they did something right there. But so for you, Jim, how do you talked about empathy for your team. How do you instill empathy for the customer into your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it really starts with understanding what are their challenges and what they're trying to accomplish, and what's important to them. So I think, I don't know that it's 100% empathy. I think it's more just understanding what their needs are, and really making sure that we as a marketing team are catering to those needs. Of course, there's a whole different aspect of customer lifecycle management, and making sure that we're paying attention and we're making this shift as a company, from the point that we engage with a customer through the full life cycle of the customer, when they deploy the solution, the next best product, and things of that sort, and making sure that we're helping them along their journey, helping them to go at their own pace. And I think one of the things that, the way that Amit brings empathy to it is he really, we have a lot of customers that are still on-prem and they're in the process of thinking about modernizing to the cloud. A lot of companies basically just cut it off and say, we're going to end of life that. You got to move at this point. And Amit has basically said to our customers that we're not going to cut you off. We're going to let you go at your own pace. We know that you have your own objectives, and we're not going to force fit that to happen. And our customers really appreciate that, and that builds a lot of loyalty within our customer base, which I think is really important. I think there's different ways to go about helping to provide incentives, sort of carrots and sticks along the way to help people to do that migration. And I think getting your data ready for AI is really the fire that's burning under them now, because if your data is not ready, then you're not going to be ready to implement AI across your organization. And that's kind of one of our key value propositions. So we're definitely seeing some tailwinds from that perspective. And in order to implement AI, you got to move to the cloud. So I think we're seeing a lot more customers interested from that perspective. But I encourage my team to constantly engage with customers. A great example was we have a big summit in New York at the beginning of the year. It's called Master Data Management, which is one of our key categories from a product perspective that we have. And we have about, I think it was about 400 to 500 customers that came into New York for that event. It's a full day event. And we were developing some messaging about the migration to the cloud. And I tasked our lead on that, who's on the product marketing side, to set up a bunch of meetings with customers while they're there at the conference and test the messaging and get some feedback. And I think he had like 8 different meetings with customers, and it was night and day. From where he started, what he thought was the right messaging, to at the end of that day, he's like, "Oh my God, like this is crazy." And you pick up keywords that customers use, and so I'm trying to instill that across the team, that we do testing as much as we possibly can. Of course, you want to talk to the sales team, but a lot of things get filtered sometimes from the sales team. So you got to go direct to customers, hear it from the horse's mouth, and engage with them, and find different points at events, customer advisory boards. There's many times when we engage with customers to get specific feedback, and so that's a key part of what I try to instill in the team.
Yeah, you mentioned that messaging. I love that. Actually talking to the customers about it beforehand, right? And here's another lesson. You said branding is much more than a campaign, and it must be connected to your strategy and messaging hierarchy. This was from Kate Hutchinson, the former CMO at Polycom. How did you learn this from Kate?
Yeah. So Kate is what I would consider is a branding and messaging expert. That's her superpower. She has a process that she follows. She's done a lot of work across many companies as a CMO, as a consultant, and been hugely successful. And so I learned from Kate because I came up from the product side in product management, product marketing. I was a GM for a little while. And so, when I was under her, I learned a lot about branding and messaging and the whole Marcom side, which really helped to round me out as a marketeer. And she really starts with, what is the vision and strategy of the company, and really hardwiring the brand into what that strategy is, aligned, specifically with what the CEO's vision is of where the company's going. And one of the things that Kate did exceptionally well, which I learned from, is really working closely with the technical team, understanding what the solution is, and pulling out the simplification of how do you articulate what the value proposition is, what the outcomes are, and how do you message complex technology. And so getting in the room, spending a day workshopping with the technical team, whiteboarding and bouncing ideas off them was something that I learned from her, and I still use to this day. And one of the things that she really taught me was just the simplification. Like, you have to bring it down to a level where everybody understands. You can't be too clever. You can't be super technical. Of course, many of the things that we sell in Silicon Valley, there's a technical audience, but there's also a business outcome that you have to really focus on, because at the end of the day, technology and innovation is gonna fuel business outcomes and help people's lives, be better. And I think a lot of companies get really too caught up on the nits and gnats and the details of the technology, and they lose a lot of people. So that was a big thing that I learned from Kate in terms of branding, and that helped me, as I took over CMO at Polycom, and then in my other engagements as CMO, definitely leveraged a lot of the things that she taught me from that perspective.
So I like that flow of having, meeting with the technical teams and understanding the product better so you can have that value proposition communicated to the brand. But what about anything flowing in the opposite direction? Like you in marketing, we talked about being close to the customer. Do you ever work with your product team, especially with your product marketing background, and say, hey, here's also things that we should be adding to the roadmap, right? It's not just like, okay, the things you guys have created, we're going to put out there, brand it well, value prop it well. We're ultimately serving customer. And kind of here's what we're learning from the customer. We're testing messages, we're talking to them. And so how do we get these actual features and functions into the product? So we're not just communicating a value, we're actually building that value. So do you ever kind of work in that direction, have the river flow in the opposite direction?
Yeah, I think it depends on where that line is drawn between product marketing and product management. In some cases, the product marketing line is over into sort of the product management side, and in some cases, it's more towards the and engineering side. In some cases, it's more towards the go-to-market side. And so, the product marketers in that case don't get as involved relative to features and capabilities and really trying to get that input from customers. At Informatica, it's the team is much more go-to-market oriented. So my team doesn't have the responsibility of going out and assessing that, but that doesn't mean that we don't bring information back into the fold relative to the product management team and really helping them to again to articulate the overall positioning of what we're trying to accomplish. Because sometimes in some of the presentations that we have from the product leaders, it's a laundry list of stuff that we've done, a lot of capabilities, and it gets lost. And so I think where the product marketing team really helps is to up level some of those messages, working with them and helping to articulate sort of the overarching theme of what we're doing, and then calling out some of the key things that we're delivering to support that. In addition to the long list of laundry stuff, because there's always one or two things that a customer really wants, and from a engineering perspective, you have to make sure that you communicate that as well.
Yeah, another lesson you mentioned, test messaging and usability. You said you learned this from Joe Cipher, your former manager at Palm. You gave a great example of how you used this recently at that customer event. But how did you originally learn this from Joe?
Yeah, Palm was a great learning opportunity for me because I come from GT Wireless and had been running. A lot of analytics there was part of my job, but overall kind of product marketing and product management. But really stepped that up when I joined Palm. And, one of the founders, Jeff Hawkins, who, invented the Palm Pilot, he walked around with a block of wood in his hand to try to determine like what size should it be. He would engage with people, talk with people, like what would you want this thing to do, and what are the capabilities you'd like to have. And so he did a ton of research and kind of set the tone for that. And Joe was just a really talented product marketer and product manager in terms of really assessing what the market needs were, and everything that we did, we tested with customers. When we and when I was on his team, we worked on the world's first wireless device. It was called the Palm 7, and it was a really really fun project and product that we worked on. And I was responsible for the services side of that. So, and one of the key things I learned at Palm was just from a user interface perspective, as we built out the user interface to interact with your billing. It was the first over-the-air wireless activation that we worked with Bell South on. It was one of the first online billing systems that we had, so you could actually engage with your bill online. Again, dating myself a little bit here, but building that whole user interface, working with engineering, was grounded in talking with customers. And everything we did, we talked with customers. The box that the product shipped in, all of the key elements of that was all tested with customers. And so that was my great training ground, learning from Joe in terms of how he approached things, how he thought about things. and really helped me to think about, from a user perspective. And a big theme there is simplification. How do you simplify things and make sure that, again, you're clearly articulating things in simple language? Don't get too cute. Don't try to use big words. Don't try to show people how smart you are. Bring it down to the level of a 10-year-old so that a 10-year-old understands it. And if that happens, then everybody in your audience is going to understand it as well.
I love that. At one point, I wrote a children's book about conversion rate optimization and just try to, again, bring it down and understand, explain what it is. I love that you mentioned testing. What has been some of the most interesting test results you've seen in your career? Because I love we're talking to marketers who test, and it's always sometimes like some surprising things that come out. One of my favorite case studies we did was with the Obama campaign back several years ago. Nothing political on our side. It's just, they did a lot of testing. And one of their great test results was that the subject line, "Hey," they didn't think it would work, but that was like their killer subject. They never would have guessed it. That was a great subject line. It turned into a meme with like Ryan Reynolds or something like that. But even for you, that's what the fun of testing is. You go and you have a hypothesis. You think it's going to work. Hopefully, a lot of times it does, but sometimes it really surprises you. So, any test results come to mind where you're like, "Wow, I didn't think it would go that way"?
Yeah, I can't think of anything specifically offhand. That was like we thought this, and it was dramatically different than what we had thought. I gave you the example, of the summit that we had, and that messaging changed dramatically based on customer feedback. But I'm a big believer in testing, and we do testing all the time. A great example is we just made a change to our Contact Us button on our website. And we changed the location of it, we changed the color of it, and we saw like a 30% increase in click on that contact me, just based on the positioning, the color, and so forth. So there's things like that. And certainly, we're doing hourly testing on our website to see what works better and look at those results. From a content perspective, again, we do a lot of testing beforehand, bouncing off of a sales team, bouncing off of customers when we can. We can't do it for every piece, of course, but for some of the larger hero pieces that we're going to invest a significant amount of time and dollars into, we definitely test that. We bounce things off industry analysts to get their input, which I think is a great source as well, because they talk to a lot of customers and have a lot of knowledge around the market. It is as a modern marketer, you have to be testing across everything that you're doing, making sure that you're pulling in the right audiences. But then there comes a time where you have to make the decision, and you're not going to, as we talked about earlier, you have many people and different audiences across the company that have different opinions, and you have to make a call at some point in terms of what direction you're going to go. And some people are not going to agree with it, but you might make a mistake, but you gotta make a decision and move on. I think there's sometimes you can get caught up in analysis paralysis and just not move fast enough. And with testing, especially from a digital perspective, you got to move fast on that, and you got to make decisions. And some are going to be good, and you have to have enough thick skin to understand that some of them are going to fail, and that's part of the process. And if you're not failing, you're probably not pushing the envelope enough.
That's right. You're not learning. One more lesson here. The higher you get in the organization, the more details you need to learn, you need to know. And you learn this from Peter Lee, the former CEO of Polycom. So I assume you learned this maybe when you were first jumping in a role in your career when you moved into management. Maybe was that it? Or
it's kind of counterintuitive, and you think as you go up in an organization and you move into higher level positions that you have this you move from knowing all the details to just this more broader perspective, but it's actually the opposite. And Peter was a big believer in this, and I am as well. I think it's really important that as a CMO and or a marketing leader, you know all the things that are happening across your team. You're close to it, because I think one of the most important things of my job is making the connections and connecting the dots in terms of, we're doing that, did you talk to so and so, because the things that they're doing, I think, can connect in really well, and or the message you're using there isn't the same message we're using over here. So having that overall purview, and then just being, as you report out on things into the executive team, into the CEO, into the board, you have to have your arms around what the organization is doing. So you have to know the details in order to, in my opinion, drive better performance. So Peter was definitely a stickler on that, and he expected us to know all the details of our organization, and I've kind of taken that to heart as I've moved forward in my career. So that was a great learning from him that I've definitely applied to the CMO roles that I've had.
You talked about how you communicate to your team. I think Forward Friday was one of the things. How do you want your team to communicate to you so you make sure you know the details? Right. So, for example, I did a great case study with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University at one point. They reached out to me and we used to publish benchmark data, and they showed this really marketer did this really great report how she took our benchmark data and they just took all their performance data, and she would send it out regularly to the team so they knew those details of how they were performing. So I think sometimes with the CMO, it's always like, well, how much do we tell them? How much do we not tell them? You're like, I want to be in the weeds. Maybe not those words and putting those in your mouth, but how do you want your team to communicate up to you so you do know those details?
Yeah, so it comes back to building trust and having transparency. And I emphasize to my team on a constant basis that my virtual door is always open, and I am accessible whenever you need me. I'm here for you. And so I think that the team definitely takes that to heart. They know that they can speak their mind to me and be honest and be transparent, because that's the only way we're going to get better. And I try to emphasize to my team as well, and just read a book on this, which was really good, around radical candor, and being candid to each other is going to help us to perform better. So whether it's an HR issue, whether it's something that you don't believe that we should be doing, it's something that you think we should stop doing, or you have a specific idea, I absolutely want to hear about it. So I engage with my team. I do skip level meetings. We do all hands. I do this every Friday, the communication, and I invite, in that communication, I invite their opinion back. And I typically get 10 to 15 responses every week from people in terms of their thoughts and their ideas around, the content that I send out. And I really appreciate that and encourage that. So that's a really important part of having a high performance team, is having that level of transparency and trust with each other. And not only to me, but with their peers as well, which I think I've really worked hard to build that culture within the team. And I think that's a key part of our success.
Well, we talked about so many different things, Jim, that you've done in your career, that you've learned in your career. If you had to break it down, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
Yeah. So I think being, as a CMO, I think it's really important to be a well-rounded marketer. So as people are coming up in their career, I highly encourage people to take lateral moves and to get the broader perspective of marketing, because it's really challenging as you get into a senior role if you haven't had that sort of visibility into the different functions of marketing, because they are all very different. And so that's one piece, is just being well-rounded and making sure that you're having exposure to those, because sometimes you're either a product person, or you're a branding person, or you're a demand gen person. And if you move into a CMO role, then you have a lot of learning to do across those other areas. I would say building the relationships and having alignment, again, as a marketing leader, with sales and product, and now customer success, as we do, full cycle customer management, having that alignment, the relationships, the trust with those teams, meeting with them regularly, collaborating with them, having interlock meetings with them is critically important, because if marketing is a silo, it's not going to work. Whoever your CEO is, they're going to have the expectation that you're collaborating across the team, and your marketing is sandwiched in between those. And I believe is one of the most important functions to pull people in and bring things together, because typically the product teams and the sales teams sometimes are not on the same page, and marketing helps them to get on that same page. So that collaboration, I think, is really important. Having a deep understanding of the business. What are the levers that you can pull, and that gets into understanding the products, the customers at a detailed level. Because whenever if you're a really good marketer, whenever you come to the table, you are going to be an expert on customers, market, and you understand the business. If you don't have those things in your tool belt, so to speak, you're not going to have the credibility, and you're going to be a tactical function. So you have to work to become a really strategic function within the organization in order to have that credibility and trust of others across the organization. So I would say, those are some of the key things, and from a leadership perspective, again, really caring deeply about your employees, getting them engaged, and making sure that every day they wake up, they're excited about coming to work. So the inspirational piece of leadership, I think, is really important to the success of being, a great marketeer and a great leader within a marketing organization. So I would say those are probably top of mind, most important things.
Well, I was excited to get to learn from you today, Jim. So thanks for letting me pick your brain for an hour here. I really appreciate it.
No, it's been great. Thanks for having me on. It's been fantastic.
Thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.